Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session on artificial intelligence and warfare. I feel privileged to chair this session that has two very knowledgeable experts on artificial intelligence. As we know, AI is the branch of computer science concerned with developing machines that can complete tasks that typically require human intelligence. But before I come to the experts, let me just give you a brief lowdown on where we are in this exciting new scientific venture or frontier. We have called space the final frontier earlier, which it no longer is. And I may not be too wrong in saying that AI was a frontier that started getting investigated way back in 1940s. But the scientific inquiry has really made giant strides in the past 4 decades or so, with the pace really quickening with availability of exponentially increased computing power and the advent of machine learning. But more on machine learning from our two experts later. AI is being researched and developed on two tracks, the civilian and military. And it may not be wrong to say that the civilian field may be a step ahead, and the developments there are being pulled into the military field with the required adaptations. China may be in the lead in AI research and development, though there are conflicting views in this regard because this is a highly classified field. On 20th of July 2017, the Chinese government released a strategy detailing a plan to take the lead in AI by 2030. Currently, it is primarily focused on using AI to make faster and more well-informed decisions, as well as developing a variety of autonomous military vehicles. Russia announced in the same year its intention in AI technologies when President Putin said, and I quote, "Whoever becomes the leader in this field will rule the world," unquote. Moscow is more focused on robotics. Similarly, the US National Defense Strategy, released in January 2018, identified artificial intelligence as one of the key technologies that will, as the document says, ensure the US will be able to fight and win the wars of the future. Money is literally pouring in, with the US venture capitalists investing around $8 billion in R&D in 2018 alone. Similarly, a Congressional Research Service paper states that its Department of Defense, its unclassified investment in AI have gone up from just over 600 million in 2016 to a projected 2.5 billion in 2021, with the department reportedly maintaining over 600, I repeat, 600 active AI projects. So what can AI do? And why is it such a sought after technology? While a number of analysts believe that the technology will have minimal or some moderate impact, most believe that AI will have at least an evolutionary, if not a revolutionary effect. AI technology could facilitate autonomous operations, lead to more informed and quick military decision making, thereby augmenting the speed and scale of military actions. It is being incorporated in ISR as well as in logistics, cyber ops, information operations, and that's important. So info operations, and we'll talk about it as we go along. Command and control, semi-autonomous and autonomous vehicles, and very controversial lethal autonomous vehicles. So instead of making repairs now on the non-lethal side, the United States Air Force is beginning to use AI for predictive aircraft maintenance. But there is a negative side too, and it may also be unpredictable or vulnerable to unique forms of manipulation. And we'll talk about it in our discussions. And with such a powerful tool as the AI coming in the hands of people, and I need to correct that, not just people, but machines who can wield destructive power, it is obviously imperative that policy making and its implementation keep pace. So in India, what should the government do now as in an institutional way so that we are not left behind in R&D and in the policy making field? And may I just flag two issues before the experts come in. One is information warfare with the menace of fake news permeating our consciousness, and lethal autonomous vehicles. With the question of giving autonomy to a machine to make life and death decisions and taking a human out of the loop, we are in dangerous territory. We have two very learned people with us, Mr. Rajiv Malhotra joining us from the US and Lieutenant General PJS Pannu here in Gurgaon. But first, we'll move to Mr. Rajiv Malhotra, and I'll introduce General Pannu when his turn comes. Mr. Malhotra, he graduated from St. Stephen's College in Delhi almost 50 years back and moved to the United States for studying physics and computer science. He is an entrepreneur in IT industry and launched Infinity Foundation that specializes in study of Indian civilization and its place in the world. He has a forthcoming book in January 2021, AI and the Future of Power, coming on. And that's something we're looking forward to and which will get discussed in this fest. Over to you, Mr. Malhotra. You can please unmute yourself. Over to you.
Namaste, and thank you, Air Marshal, for a wonderful introduction to the field of artificial intelligence. My posture as a physicist and computer scientist almost 50 years ago, while doing graduate studies in computer science, my topic was artificial intelligence, even though at the time it was a rudimentary field. We were still trying to write chess programs, which of course now is considered trivial. So this is a field that has come a long way. And in the last 4 or 5 years, I decided to get back as a topic of study, not becoming a artificial intelligence technocrat again, but looking at its implications to society, to politics, to economics, to military, to unemployment, all those areas. And so I being based in the US, although I visit India 4 times every year, except this year I'm unable to do that, I've studied the US and I've studied China, and I've looked at the role of artificial intelligence in the US-China conflict. I believe that when people think it's just a trade war, I mean, they don't understand that actually the US is very, very concerned that China has taken a lot of secrets in advanced technology. And when I say AI, it's an umbrella term for a lot of technologies, including robotics, including drones, including a whole lot of fields, including nanotechnology, aerospace, and AI is sort of the brains that puts it all together and gives them another force multiplier. So when you look at all this, US is very concerned that China has leapfrogged at the expense of the United States, and the US, especially the Trump administration, has suddenly woken up and decided to talk back and get back into the action. So I'm going to look at, in a few minutes that I have, I'm going to present my view of the China-US tension, and then I'll talk about where I see India is based on whatever information I've gathered, because I've read quite a lot, everything I can get my hands on, Niti Aayog reports, various government reports and so on India. And in a nutshell, India is a late entrant. India is many years behind in both China and US in this technology. It's very good that India is getting interested and very serious about it. And being in the company of 2 eminent military leaders is very heartening that the government and the military especially are taking this matter very seriously. I believe that AI is a game changer. It's a very, very serious thing. It's not just evolution. It's going to make as much a difference as the industrial revolution, the electrification of factories and things like that. the haves and have-nots will be redefined, and it will be there'll be new haves and new have-nots based on where they stand in terms of the artificial intelligence technology. The military implications cannot be isolated from the rest of the economy and the rest of society, because after all, a society with more economic power can invest more than a society which has less economic power. A society which is socially more cohesive has less to invest in keeping itself together, versus a society which has got a lot of internal rift and internal conflicts, because a lot of resources are drained in order just to keep the society together. So I think there's a whole macro ecosystem, which is what my book is looking at, how AI impacts major nation states, and India is my case study in that book. Now, just to give a few points, because I'm not able to show the slides, but I will make a few points. The 2030 projected incremental AI economy. How much is the global increase in global economy, global GDP, because of AI? The PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is an eminent American company, says it's 16 trillion, and it predicts that 7 trillion, the largest part of it, goes to China. And this is the American prediction. So US is number 2. And then there is other countries like Europe and Southern Europe and Asia, Japan, South Korea, etc., Latin America. India is clubbed in as rest of the world. Rest of the world with just 1.2 trillion out of 16. So India will get a fraction of a small amount. So it's almost like a 10-to-1 difference between India and China as it stands today. Now, of course, that doesn't mean it'll remain that way. India can catch up, and India, I hope, will catch up. But I want to first set the stage with some facts. As we speak today, US, China, and Japan are responsible for almost 80% of all AI patent filings. 75% of all the blockchain patents are US and China together. 75% of all cloud computing market share. If you look at the 70 largest digital platform companies, 70 largest, 90% of the market capitalization is these two countries. So basically, you can say, and these are United Nations statistics, UNCTAD has come up with this kind of a report. So the role of AI is very central to the whole future of China. China has bet its place in the world using AI as the central technology. And the United States has now responded because it realizes that things have gone too far. Until the US response recently at the government level, it was the US private sector, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, a lot of these companies, Netflix, Amazon. It's the US tech giants that were doing the AI. Defense was involved. Defense was also involved, but in not as much as Air Marshal said. But things have changed. The US government has really activated its role as a government, and they have initiated a whole lot of military, industrial, academic alliances. So this is something, General Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex, where the military and industry are sort of together. And actually later what happened is the military-industrial academic complex has emerged. When I was a graduate student in computer science, my professor, in the US, my professor had defense contracts, and we, the students, were part of that. I had to get security clearance with the Pentagon because I used to visit there. So this is very normal. If you're a science technology kind of a student working on a PhD or some graduate studies or something, then you work with a professor, he's got these defense contracts and you're part of it. And this is an ecosystem that India doesn't have, where defense, industry, and academics work together. India has separate silos, and this is a very big difference between the way US works. So to give you an example, the US started this National Security Commission on AI that US has started recently. And Eric Schmidt, who is the former CEO of Google, became the chairman. So they've taken a person who's head of Google into the US national security to lead the AI initiative. So you can see the confluence of industry and government working together. And the whole purpose stated in their official charter is to counter the rise of China in artificial intelligence. And they also are worried that this pandemic has been used by China to boost itself further in artificial intelligence, because it can get a lot of data, it can take advantage of other people's vulnerabilities and so on. Now, I want to discuss in brief, the US Department of Defense has always played a very important role in cutting edge technologies. DARPA, which is Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, invented what later became the internet. It used to be called DARPA Net. They dropped the D, became ARPANET, and I was using it as an academician before it was privatized and turned into public service called Internet. So it started like that. The GPS was a DARPA invention. Driverless cars, DARPA has played the pioneering role. And in artificial intelligence, there's so many projects that now the Defense Department is pioneering. So you see, in the US and in China, you will find that the military is combined very closely with the private sector. The Chinese, Alibaba and all these guys, Tencent and so on, Baidu, they're very much aligned with the People's Liberation Army. So both US and China have this in common. The Department of Defense funds a lot of stuff, some of in their own labs and some in the private sector labs. And this way, they create a whole ecosystem. The private sector brings in academics who bring in students. So this is a very big pipeline. This is something that India has to think about. So when you look at defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and nowadays the defense contractors include people like Microsoft, people like Google. They are part of the defense establishment also. So they all have defense divisions which are very big. This is an important issue which I think India does not have, that the others have. Now, I won't go into all the US Department of Defense programs. There are so many of them that we could get into. They are developing, the Navy is developing the undersea version of drones, which are automated submarines and driverless vehicles of all sorts. So you will see a military where, United States may have 1 lakh drones in the Air Force. We may have hundreds of undersea vehicles, and these would be operated with AI from a central control place somewhere and have a lot of autonomy. So as opposed to piloted planes, the pilotless planes are going to become more popular. And we can get into the Q&A, during the Q&A, on what are the implications for India, because I feel concerned about India in its neighborhood, because Pakistan probably get a lot of benefit of this from China. Now, the Indian situation is that India produces the second largest number of STEM, science, technology, mathematics, these kind of graduates. But then Niti Aayog's own report admits that the vast majority of them are not doing innovative work. They're just doing support work, maintenance work. And many of the brightest ones go abroad. And Niti Aayog did a report on artificial intelligence and found that the Indians overseas are very prominent in this field of AI. And I can tell you that is true. Indians are very smart people. They're all over the place. But Indians in India, only a small amount of them are doing pioneering work. And those two tend to be working for Google in India, Microsoft in India, Facebook in India. They're working for the American companies. And the Chinese have made big investments in AI as venture capitalists. I think in 2018 or 19, in 2018, the Chinese invested $5 billion in India in venture capital. So now, of course, there are some restrictions because of political things that have happened. Also, the Niti Aayog report says that if you look at PhDs doing research in AI and rank, India is number 10 in the world. And if you look at AI experts who are cited and quoted all over the world as influencers, it's ranked number 13. Now, this does not include the Indians who are living in America or Europe and all that, because they are not working for the Indian ecosystem. They are working for those countries. So on the one hand, India has a large talent pool. On the other hand, the talent pool has been siphoned off in other countries. India has not been able to utilize its own talent pool. The Niti Aayog report also is very critical. I'm very appreciative that they have understood the problem very clearly. That while TCS and Wipro and Tata and these, Infosys have been inside the American corporate sector and inside the American government, right in the heart of the technology and managing it, they did not invest in the future technologies. They are providing labor to the client who does the work, who owns the work. So when there are 1 lakh or whatever number of large IBM engineers are in India, We are very proud of it. But all that technology belongs to IBM and its clients. It does not belong to the Indians. So we are providing labor, but we are not owning the technology. Then we have to license the technology back. We have there is AI in Rafale jets. There is AI in newts, ships, submarines, guns. Whatever we're buying in the future, it'll have AI. And the cost of this equipment that we're buying is going to become more and more unaffordable because the foreign countries will charge a premium for it. Irony is that it's Indian people, in many cases, who are doing all this work for those foreign companies. So in my work, I'm looking at India in terms of its human resource. That's an issue in artificial intelligence. Where are we in human resource? The technology itself, how much are we developing? How much are we having to import? The big data that India has, funding, strategy, and the overall ecosystem. And I will close by saying, India needs something the scale of ISRO, something the scale of Bhabha Atomic Research, needs something of that scale, that magnitude for artificial intelligence. And therefore, we need somebody like a Homi Bhabha, Vikram Sarabhai, or Satish Dhawan, some leader of that kind to be running this AI on a very big scale. Because separate silos, fragmented here and there, is not going to be good enough. And we have almost 10 years to catch up. And we cannot spend a whole lot of time because the enemy is at the gate, so to speak. I'll close. Thank you very much. And I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra. That was wonderful. Before we go to General Pannu, if I may just ask you, you talked about the civil military interaction that's going on in the US. Lately, there has been a big paper that has come out on China's civil military fusion. Can you,
Yes.
just in about a minute or two, just talk about civil military fusion in China?
Yes. If you look at Tencent, Baidu, Alibaba, Huawei, you look at these giant four Chinese companies, and under them, there are several hundred smaller companies in a big ecosystem. And then these Chinese companies are investing in foreign countries. These Chinese companies are embedded with the People's Liberation Army. You will find that there are so many government contracts that are given to these companies. These companies are dependent on licensing and all that. So in a sense, China has got, these companies are very dual-faced. Chinese government gave birth to these giants by banning Google, Facebook, Amazon in China. The reason being, let's build a Chinese ecosystem, then it can expand all over the world. Why are we going to create market share and money and wealth to the Americans? China did this, decade ago. And we are welcoming these American companies rather than building our own ecosystem. We are very proud that, Jio is investing in, Facebook and Google are investing in Jio. The Chinese attitude is, look, we're going to create our own because we're going to own the technology from the scratch. So the Chinese military, industrial, academic complex is very integrated. And then, some of the investments they're making in India is saying we will, the Chinese investors will not be as welcome and all that. But guess what? Some of the investments being made by China are through Singapore. Some of them are through their European subsidiary. It's not so clean. It's not so clean. Alibaba invests in India through some Singapore thing. So as far as the government is concerned, it's a Singapore investment. So Chinese are very clever people. And I have friends, Indian friends in AI that China has recruited. So this is a big game that China is playing.
Yeah, we'll discuss this a little more in the Q&A. Thank you very much for that insight. We have our second panelist, Lieutenant General PJS Pannu, PVSM, AVSM, VSM. He's been a corps commander in, guess where? Leh, where all the action is happening. He's also been the Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff in headquarter IDS, Integrated Defense Staff. He's raised, and that's important, India's Defense Space Agency, the Cyber Agency, and the Special Ops Division. So he's the pioneer in setting up these three niche tri-service entities. He's an alumnus of the National Defense College, and presently he's pursuing his PhD in indigenization of defense industry for modernization of the armed forces. He's published extensively on space issues, strategy, and technology. And he believes in the armed forces setting the pace for technology-based warfare and pushing the R&D in this sector. Over to you, General Pannu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Air Vice Marshal Bahadur. It was a pleasure listening to Rajiv Malhotra on the artificial intelligence, how it is growing in the civilian world as well as in the military domains. And today we are directly challenged by it. It is no more theory that India has a challenge on the borders. This year we have been attacked virtually by the PLA. For years together, ever since we became independent, our military has been contesting these borders. And also we have challenge on over 7,000 kilometers of coastline. We have almost double than that borders with our neighbors, in which 25% of them are hotly contested. As you see today, that the PLA has occupied certain areas and is literally pushing the Indian military on the line of actual control. India has given a befitting reply, which is man-to-man reply in conventional means. But what is left to be seen is how the technology is going to here and after decide things. When AVM Bahadur was mentioning about that AI has been in play for decades together, yes, but then the Indian industry and the world industry literally sat at industry 3.0. And now that industry is sitting at 4.0, you find there are smart gadgets available. There are computers which are now networked that we call a cyber domain, which has come together. So earlier we used to call it command, control, and communications, that is C3, which has today become C5. Literally, it is command, control, communications, computers, and cyber, all put together, have given niche, capability for the digital platforms to be used differently for command and control. And then if you collect intelligence and information and put together, you find that large amount of data which can be collected and given to the commanders to process through the machine would come in handy to program the decision making and to speed up the OODA loop, which is when you observe and when you decide and act. So literally speaking, anybody who can observe, decipher what's happening in the field, decide and act faster than the other would be a winner in the battlefield. You cannot decide later than the adversary. You cannot decide wrong based on the inputs which are available to you, which are either incorrect or manipulated or are not available at all. There will be gaps in the information. What information would you process? So data collection through all these means is extremely important. It is not only data collection. Literally, when you talk about the artificial intelligence, it is connecting the machine with a human mind. When human being gets connected and then machine to machine work comes into play, ultimately the beneficiary is a human being. It cannot happen that you are developing machines which go beyond the control of a human being. They have to well within the means that the human being employ has to be completely programmed and used in a manner that the human being can benefit out of it. But when you talk about adversary, it is not human being to human being. It is actually one human against the other human by using the interface of machines. That is where the whole game becomes very complex. When you talk about artificial intelligence, there are programs, as they call it, algorithms, which are going to be written down by people. Now, who are these people who are going to program the machines? It is human being which is going to program the machine, and the human being is not experienced enough. You put a teenager to program a machine, he would do it out of fantasy. And you know what happens, when these youngsters play video games and they go around shooting the whole world, with an AK-47 mounted in front of them. And the outcome you saw in New Zealand and then later on in Sri Lanka, all over the world, the shooting has taken place because of a teenager's fantasy of a human mind, how it works and becomes a killing machine. When a human being is going to program a machine, it is going to be limited to the fantasy that he keeps. AR, VR, that is the augmented and the virtual reality, platforms are going to really come in a major manner that you do not know actually who you're dealing with, the actual human being, or you're dealing with a virtual human being. We have to close this gap and make sure that what a human mind, a matured human mind, supported by the government, supported by the rules, regulations, and supported by the rules at sea or air or ground, are the ones which are actually implemented on ground. You also cannot have a program which can be hijacked by somebody else. You know, those algorithms are available with somebody else also. Those can be stolen, those can be reprogrammed, those can be played back at you, and same information becomes your liability because it can be used against you. You have to trust the information. Say, for example, again, I'll come back to C5 and I2, that is the command, control, communication, computer and cyber. This becomes a digital connect and a platform for operating. And then you talk about the information and intelligence, which gets processed through artificial intelligence. There are a huge amount of sensors which will have to come in. We have recently signed BECA with the US, in which huge amount of geospatial data is going to be available of the adversary, which you can target with precision. But who is to take this decision? And if you're going to shoot a missile on a given target, which has been given to you as an accurate target, I do not know if you're going to neutralize the target, whether you're going to get a correct feed as that target has been destroyed, or there is going to be a virtual image given to you of a destruction having been achieved. The same information can be played back on what you want to see on your screen, and you will be happy with that. And AVM Bahadur would, agree with me that in an aircraft, if virtually you are being told your target has been engaged and destroyed, and the computer says, yes, it has been destroyed, he has no other way but to believe a machine that it has been destroyed. But would the virtual platforms be trustworthy, which are actually enmeshed with your own systems and the pilot in a manner that he knows exactly what he wanted to achieve has been achieved? The next part is the ISR. Now, ISR, I already spoke about the I of it, which became I2. The surveillance and reconnaissance has actually gone into star 2, as I understand, that it is surveillance, target acquisition, reconnaissance, and robotics. When you talk about robotics, obviously we're talking about artificial intelligence, where information will come, information will be processed, information will be acted upon by a robot in a manner that if you pre-program that this is the kind of target that I want to engage, it doesn't need to come back to the authority of making a decision, because you have actually given a pre-instruction for that kind of a target, and if there is a matching of that target, the target would get destroyed. It is just that maybe the warning would come back that the target is about to be destroyed. You could think, but it is going to be so huge in the plethora of information that will come in. The commanders may not sit and decide and take a decision on the millisecond of retracting that order. So as a result, huge amount of destruction would be based on automatic programming. And that is where, when I talk about the star 2, that is the surveillance, target acquisition, it means whatever you see, you have to just press a button that this is what I want to be destroyed. The shooter sensor integration would destroy the target on a pre-planned and a robotic manner, which is automated. And that is where the automation of any weapon system is being spoken about. It can be a tank, it can be a drone, it can be an aircraft. Today it is possible when you take out the pilot or a tank commander or somebody who's in a ship, if you take the human being out of it, why can't a plane which is flying become a ship and float on the surface and dive into the ocean and become a submarine for the moment, come back again, float around on the surface and take off and go back into the air and do whatever is required to be done. So submersible drones would mean that this submersible drone can have a multi-dimensional usage undersea, on the surface, and even in the air. Similarly, anything which works on the ground, you could have your amphibious vehicle, which is actually in the ocean, in a coastal area. It will be amphibious. It would come on the ground, fight it out, and maybe take off and go back to its own base. So as a result, the AR, VR combined with the machinery which has been programmed by itself and goes into a deep learning and self-learning can at some point become devastating if the human being is not the master of this gadget or the gadgets or the robotics which are going to be at play in this field of military and warfare. Though the technology is inevitable, it will come. But is this technology going to be your subservient? It is going to be somebody who is going to be in your control is something that is quite worrisome. In fact, I've had an experience, and a lot of Air Force officers would understand what I'm saying, that you send in a drone for reconnaissance, and you find that on your screen, it is actually returning home. And it is on auto. But it is only actually returning home. It is showing you false return home. Actually, it's already crashed. I have also seen some amount of information that it carried was actually manipulated on return, or whatever it discharged from what it was seeing. It means that the OEM has possibly shared the algorithms in a manner, or the algorithms are stolen. So when you talk about China as a manufacturing hub, China having the R&D, China having the civilian military, that is the PLA, controlling the civilian R&D as also in the manufacturing segment, the entire machinery can be programmed in a manner that you are stealing information from the entire world. Now imagine that you on a given day have a hope and you're confident that your systems are secure. Your software is with you. Your artificial intelligence, the algorithms are completely owned by you. The communication between the satellite and back to the platform is secure according to you. But China has gone into quantum technology, and quantum physics really can either secure your systems very well or also break codes faster than you can actually program them. So when you actually talk about protecting yourself and defending your own information, doing whatever is required to be done, the quantum technology can actually go not only sit where your entire information is stored, not that it can only manipulate, but I think it can completely alter the whole thing at the last minute when the push button is approaching, that the time has approached for activating the entire front. So as a result, going back to what the situation is today on ground, the Indian armed forces are sitting in super high altitude. The troops are at the actually extreme end of fatigue. They're at the extreme end. Human body is not designed to be at 15, 16, 17,000, at 20,000 feet. We've been operating at 22,000 feet in Siachen Glacier. We've been flying helicopters above the ceiling limit. It was not designed for that. We have been using all that is required, whether it is human being or technology or equipment, but all this has been either imported or has been manufactured by the Indian vendors who have not actually gone in for practices of Industry 4.0. So therefore, I urge the industry and urge the research and development to come together in India and make sure that they are leading the industry to have half a notch ahead of what the industry gives you, that is Industry 4.0, and therefore constantly keep talking about that military must think 4.5. Unless you do this, you would not have your own DARPA. You would not have the DARPA equivalent, that is in the defense or the defense industry, giving programs which are later on civilized, and not that the corporate programs are militarized. I think it has to be the other way around. I think Rajiv brought it up very well. My time is over, so I think this is a very interesting subject. One can keep talking about it on and on, but thank you very much. I would look forward to any questions if there are on this subject.
Oh, wonderful. Absolutely fine. Let's get into a few questions amongst us. I have a few queries after listening to both of you. And when I pose the question, either of you can respond, unless I address it to a particular one. Now, I was just wondering, we talked of, augmented reality and virtual reality. I know in the Air Force now, with the augmented reality, the amount of saving and realism that you can get in training pilots, is tremendous. So, and sky is the limit in that. So that is one place where we can think of, getting, especially with the present financial crunch that's going to happen. Not that this technology is going to be cheap, but it will save on flying hours, for example, for the Air Force, and similar thing could happen for the Army. General Pannu, if I can ask you, can we import artificial intelligence in isolation as a weapon system? We've imported the Rafale, for example. We imported the T-92 tanks. Can we just import artificial intelligence and incorporate? And after that, the same question to you, Mr. Ray.
AVM Bahadur, I think the answer is less of yes and more of no. You can get a platform which is programmable, but it will not contain the data, or if it comes with the data, it is not your data. Your data will have to be programmed by you. So a platform which is programmable does not have your data, and you do not have access to data, or you have not processed the data to be converted into algorithm, I think it won't work. There is a case in point in some amount of Air Force equipment that you bought, and it is not squarely answering that, but if you look at our 130s, for special ops, some of the ability that it has as far as the terrain and the navigation is concerned, well, was not given to us because I did not pay for it, and secondly, whatever was there, the data was taken out of it. And to start working on the same equipment, you have to feed in your own terrain and data, and then you have to start doing things that you can actually go to those places where you actually want to go yourself, because that is not given to you. Of course, somebody can program it for you, but then it means all your security information, which you think is yours, would be given to you by somebody else. And if somebody else gives it to you, and I'm not saying whether you have a trustworthy partner or otherwise, but you will never be able to trust something which has been, that is the problem with Huawei. That is the problem with the chip manufacturing. We don't know from where what comes. As a result, when you start importing the equipment, you do not know whether the data that is already there in a programmable way or otherwise, how it will mesh in with your own data. So therefore, data autonomy and data fusion and understanding of data is something which I think is a major problem. The platforms are welcome, but data is something we have to program our own.
Rajiv?
Sorry, I fully agree with him, what he said, but I'll go a step further. When you import AI, not only are you depending on data and the machine learning on somebody else's environment, you have to redo it for your environment, but it's even worse because you'll always be one generation behind their capability. You'll always have to go back to them because you've done your investment on their platform. You'll have to go back to them for upgrades. You'll have to the other thing is, as he said already, you are assuming that the image you're getting is true because his data, his sensors are providing you that image. It may be true because they are friends today, but maybe tomorrow it won't be true. So this is the path towards digital colonization. We're becoming a digital colony. It's like when England became an industrial power, we became a colony as a result of that because we became dependent on their technology and all that. And for 200 years, that's what happened. So this rise of AI is going to disrupt the world system. There'll be new haves and have-nots. There'll be colonizers and colonies. US and China will be colonizers. China has already colonized Pakistan. China has colonized parts of Africa. By giving them this technology, making them dependent on the Chinese surveillance, sensors, facial recognition, tracking, all that these other countries are becoming dependent on. China knows more about what's going on, who's doing what through this facial recognition that they have put in thousands of places, even in Pakistan along their corridor. So the India to import has multiple problems. This is the only way India can become reliant on its own AI is to have joint collaboration. You need a lot of budget for this. Military industry should work together, build Indian systems. Why can't we do it? Because India has so many brilliant engineers working everywhere in the world and producing the major breakthroughs. We just haven't been able to utilize them for ourselves. So and the quantum computing I was mentioned. I want to say this: quantum computing will be another game changer. Google is developing a quantum computer, which it says will be 100 million times faster than the conventional computer once it is ready. Now, it may take a decade or whatever it takes. I know that TIFR has started a program because they hired one of my friends who came from overseas just to help start this program on quantum computing, because the Indian side is very concerned that China, once it gets quantum computing, they'll be able to break all the security. All the security, we won't be able to break into theirs. They'll be able to break all their security, plant fake stuff and fake status of what's happened to a plane or whatever. So this ability to invade and intrude somebody else's space will be available to a quantum computing system unless the other side has an equal system also. So this asymmetry of power that AI will give you is a dangerous thing if you become dependent on imported part from here, imported part from there. You're buying some plane, but what makes it brilliant is that it's got AI in it and you don't know much about it. You don't know those algorithms. Somebody else is pushing the buttons. India is falling into a trap because it hasn't become powerful enough in its own R&D.
Okay. That's a wonderful term you said, digital colonization. Actually, a very powerful term, digital colonization. To both of you, just one minute each so that we have time later on for question answers from the audience. Lethal autonomous weapons. Where are we and what should be done? A minute each to both of you, starting with you, Rajiv Pannu.
Autonomous weapons are a possibility. It depends who programs it. Amateur will program it in a manner that the autonomous vehicle or a weapon will be very prematurely, it'll act in a manner that the programmer would do it. How many people are really experienced in that kind of a war fighting? Provided the mature minds, you see, I would say a lot of veterans and retired people need to actually go into putting their experience into how these machines should function. The new generation can make it function, but they will not be able to put their experience into it. So I think there is a fusion between the veterans who are, experienced in warfare, and the youngsters can bring in technology together. That kind of a fusion is extremely important. But for an accident to happen, there are very high chances today. And I would say one has to be extremely careful, and this has to be evolutionary. This cannot be, revolutionary.
Rajiv?
So I just want viewers to know something very interesting. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency in the USA, is the one that started autonomous vehicles, driverless car revolution by offering a competition with an award. You had to make a vehicle in the Nevada desert. There was where the vehicle would start and the race would go. It was 100, 200 miles long race. And you could do anything you want, and the vehicle that got there first would win the prize. First year it was done, and they did it many years. First year it was done, no vehicle went more than a few feet. They all blew up and they fell apart and all that. But I think it created an excitement. There was a team from Stanford, there was a team from Carnegie Mellon, there were a team from MIT. The second time it happened, several vehicles completed the race. Some did it better than others. So this started a kind of a private sector, and with young people from universities, and there were sponsors, just like in Formula One, there were people sponsoring, corporate people sponsoring my team, your team. Actually, it created a lot of excitement. Now, Indian military and government need to harness the creativity of the industry, bring them on board, and do these kind of things. Have some competitions. For a civilian, it may look like a civilian thing, but why was DARPA doing it? They were not interested in making ordinary cars. They were making military vehicles, but they brought the civilian energy on their side. So this kind of a collaboration India needs, because we want to ignite the imagination of Indian people. We want more people working in India, for India, in this technology, and the military has to be a very important part driving this whole thing, and military has to have a huge budget from the government.
Okay, we need to end this session, but before we close, from the panelist side, why I brought up this topic of lethal autonomous weapons is because mankind is interested in a way that we are seeing the dangers of these laws, as they're called, lethal autonomous weapon systems. The United Nations already has a committee in Geneva looking into this aspect. And I will end this by just quoting that, where artificial intelligence is leading us to in warfare, if the ethical points, and if we don't keep our feet on ground, if we don't stop doing better than the others as far as giving autonomy to machines is concerned, to quote a speaker who was there in Geneva, who said that we will actually come to a stage where we will have to lay down what would be the role of human beings in warfare, because you would have given so much of autonomy to machines. So with that, we come to a close. Thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra, Rajiv Malhotra, and General Pannu for this wonderful session and insights and thoughts into artificial intelligence and where it's taking us in modern warfare. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, AVM Bahadur and Rajiv Malhotra. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both of you. Wonderful. It was my pleasure. I learned a lot, and I'm very happy to meet luminaries like you, because to take my work forward, I mean, I need people to talk about this. My book is going to come out in 45 days, and I'll be sending you copies.
Thank you so much. Looking forward.
And what's the latest? Who's become your who's the president now?
Well, that's a toss-up. But I'll tell you, as far as India is concerned, India should not rely on Republican or Democrat. India should rely on the Pentagon, the CIA, the Department of Defense. They are long-term thinkers. They're very smart guys. India should be like in the case of Israel, it's military to military. It used to be Pakistan military was very close with the American military. It doesn't matter who's president, not president. So I personally think the strategic alliance India should have is more at the military level rather than political level. Political level is volatile. Whoever comes in is not. If Trump comes in, he cannot run after 4 years. If Biden comes in, he's too old to run for more than 4 years. So either way, it's a short-term solution. And India should go deeper than that.
That was a wonderful exposition of artificial intelligence and where it will come into air warfare. So we have General Pannu with us. Mr. Malhotra had to leave. General Pannu, there are some questions that have come up from this wonderful audience that we have. The first question is, when we are talking of defense and warfare, secrecy matters and matters quite a lot. So how will we protect data when we are using artificial intelligence in military systems?
Okay, thank you for asking this question, very relevant. And also, it cautions me that in India, when we do not manufacture our own chips and we do not manufacture hardware of the kind which is required to run the artificial intelligence platforms, it is going to be a problem at the moment. When we talk about running these platforms for warfighting, we are talking about connectivity, which is when we talk about digital network-centric warfare. A large amount of data will have to be based on satellite or space communications. We need to own our own satellites. We need to own our own hardware and software and our own algorithms. If we do not, then there is a fair amount of chance that there would be piracy or leakage. Second thing is that in the conventional encryption of it, unless we also get into the quantum technology and quantum physics, where the adversary is going to actually start hacking your sites using that technology, we will not be able to defend ourselves in those encryptions, and we will also need to upgrade ourselves to the quantum technology and quantum computing. So these are essentials to protect the data. without which we cannot go to space. We'll have to stick to fiber, and fiber cannot actually move kind of terabytes of information in war fighting. It can only be done where you have fixed platforms and not mobile platforms.
Okay. So basically, it finally comes down to, our own in-house development of software and protection systems, finally. So that we have to ensure. The second question to you is, why is the Indian defense industry lagging behind in AI, and would the private industry help? And this is something which has actually been the theme of both our speakers. And Mr. Malhotra had talked about the fact how Indian brains, shall I say, IT brains are being utilized by other countries, other entities, and we possibly are buying from them our own software made by Indian minds. Your views, General Pannu?
If I do plain speak, I'm afraid to say that we are doing a lot of lip service to this, and we have not been able to develop the kind of ecosystem where the private players can be trusted to join the government ecosystem. There are silos where the DRDO, ISRO, government, that is a bureaucracy, and the private players are sitting separately, distinctly, and there is trust deficit. There is a technological gap. The technology which comes from outside, from government to government means is huge at cost and delays. You don't get that kind of technology which is futuristic or even contemporary through those means. As a result, we have to develop our own DARPA equivalent, where we have the private industry, our own government research and development means of the ISRO and DRDO put together, along with the government, that technocrats have to come in. The bureaucrats just do not understand. For them, trade and bureaucracy do not form a good ecosystem, because there's always lack of trust. You will find a lot of firewalls are put in the procedures of procurement, where if you want to procure something today, the procedures are so long that the private players actually shy away from contributing anything meaningful. And once it finally comes in, it is much too late and much too less in terms of quality. I think we need to build those ecosystems. Sooner we do it on ground, move away from lip service and implement those policies very quickly. I think we will have to learn from the Chinese and the Americans how the private players and government and the research and development, the military, are getting interface together. Military and the civil interface is extremely important where private industry is concerned.
Yeah, it finally boils down to two things, the intermingling of capability, which the services require, and processes, which our bureaucratic setup requires. So the capability and the processes have to match. Unfortunately, that's where the lag is. Understanding that the processes have to match up with capabilities, the requirements of which for the three services are actually just gallivanting with the computer revolution that is ongoing. General Pannu, the third question is, AI is a little bit technical. The AI systems are basically software driven, so they lack context. Basically, the human element which a human mind would have brought in. And that's where brings into the aspect that I spoke earlier in my introductory remarks about lethal automatic warfare weapon systems. So how do we incorporate texture or context in artificial intelligence?
The cognitive power of the human mind and the machine have to first correlate with each other. What is desired, actually, when you have to run any platforms which are based on artificial intelligence, I call it H, M to M H. It means human-machine interface has to be there, and machine-to-machine interface has to be there, and at the end of it, again, it is machine-to-human interface. So unless we have our war fighters, our thinkers, our leaders interfaced through training and through augmentation to deal with the machine, unless we write up programs through our own experiences unless those programs are run according to the desires and the needs of the nation, that kind of an interface is unlikely to come. So therefore, the military and the industry put together have to actually cover this gap and make machines think the way the military commander would think. The military machines will have to perform the way military leader would want them to perform on ground. And similarly, the feedback, the intelligence and the information has to flow back from the war to the war room in a similar manner. So, that kind of interface is extremely important.
Okay, in very short time, so that I have just a minute to wind up at the end, General Pannu, I'm sure the audience is is wanting an answer to things happening in Ladakh. The latest thing that came out in the press regarding that high power microwaves having been used, of course, been debunked by the Indian Army, but just a word on that. As also, can AI be used in the swarms, which the psychological warfare which the Chinese are trying to put on us?
I think theoretically and technically there are certain possibilities, but on ground it is not what is being reported. The Indian Army has had no experience of being targeted by microwave, power and all. Second thing is, as far as swarms is concerned, the swarm technology is again proven. It has been used in certain areas, but when you come to super high altitude area, the kind of temperature and the icing and the brittleness that comes into any quadcopter or a drone, and also the wind factor is such that the wind and the temperature put together has not made this kind of a technology possible in such altitudes. As a result, some drones are certain that they are there, but not in swarms, and certain anti-drone capabilities have also been developed. But the way they are being spoken in the plains, I think these capabilities will have to be really put to test. And this is more theory as far as high altitude is concerned. I think we will have to do more of conventional and kinetic warfare there. Of course, there is technology, which I don't deny, which is being put to use. I think a lot of it would get tested in case we go to hot war situation with China.
Yeah, okay. And one thing that you possibly missed out is the effect of the lower density. Aircraft which can carry, like for example, the IL-76, which can carry 40 tons of load on sea level, actually comes back with nothing from Leh during summers. So temperature and high altitude have a bad influence on the payload of these weapon systems. It's been a fascinating discussion with you, General Pannu, and Mr. Malhotra, who is unfortunately not here for the Q&A. Thank you very much, and I hope the audience have got some insights. We can talk the whole day on artificial intelligence and machine learning, the combination of which is taking mankind into an area where we actually need to have a supervision through ethics. Otherwise, we are talking in terms of giving power to machines to take autonomous decisions, life and death decisions, which is a very dangerous thing that we all need to be aware. Thank you very much, General Pannu, and the organizers for calling all of us. Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. Jai Hind.